Welcome to the first edition of Mission Minute News. I am Sister Jean Harris, OP. First, the headlines. Church reacts to the violence and calls to fight racism. Clergy sexual abuse in Catholic Church today. Human trafficking under COVID-19. Fire at San Gabriel Mission, and a few Supreme Court rulings. Now the news in detail. Church reacts to the violence and calls to fight racism. We are still going through the brunt of the aftermath of George Floyd's death and the tragic demonstrations and destruction that followed. We've also seen the destruction of the Confederate statues and statues of other historical figures. Pope Francis said, "I have witnessed with great concern the disturbing social unrest in your nation in these past days, following the tragic death of Mr. George Floyd. My friends, we cannot tolerate or turn a blind eye to racism and exclusion in any form, and yet claim to defend the sacredness of every human life. At the same time, we have to recognize that the violence of recent nights is self-destructive and self-defeating. Nothing is gained by violence, and so much is lost." Many of the bishops in the country responded to the situation, condemning it. The U.S. Bishops' Conference said, "This is the latest wake-up call that needs to be answered by each of us in a spirit of determined conversion. As members of the Church, we must stand for the more difficult, right, and just actions instead of the easy wrongs of indifference." The responsibility of any neighbor, any citizen, especially those of us who profess belief in Jesus Christ, is to do the work of accompanying their brothers and sisters who carry this pain every day of their lives. Catholics cannot be content to stand on the sidelines of this struggle. In the face of and to fight racism, Catholics must hunger for justice as we hunger for the Eucharist. The Gospel calls us, as we prepare for communion, to go first and be reconciled, from Matthew chapter 5, with our sisters and brothers. At this moment, when the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us the depth of our need for the sacraments and for community, this national outcry should lead Catholics to conversion, repentance, and reconciliation. The only authentic moral response to this moment in our nation's history is a sustained conversion of heart and soul to genuinely comprehend the overwhelming evil of racism in our society, and to refuse to rest until we have rooted it out, said California Catholic Conference President and Diocese of San Diego Bishop Robert McElroy. San Bernardino Bishop Gerald Barnes spoke out forcefully on the need to address the continued injustice of racism. The wound that many are carrying with regard to race and its relationship to our criminal justice system has been tragically reopened. We cannot dismiss the outcry of the people for justice for all before the law. In a press conference, Governor Gavin Newsom called the racial injustice a pandemic on top of a pandemic that must be addressed. So often we try to meet the moment with rhetoric. We feign resolve. I could put together a group of advisors, put together a task force. I could promise and promote a few pieces of legislation. But program passing is not problem solving. You've got to change hearts, minds. You've got to change culture, not just laws, Newsom said. Bishops from throughout the state of California released a 40-minute length video reenacting the Stations of the Cross to draw attention to the sin of racism and ask God's help in eliminating it. It is also intended to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the tragic killings at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and the Juneteenth holiday, celebrating the end of slavery in the United States. The Stations of the Cross is both a reenactment and a reminder of the struggle and humiliation that our Lord Jesus Christ went through on his way to crucifixion and his ultimate resurrection. Each of the 14 stations depict incidents that took place as Jesus carried his own cross to Mount Calvary, the site of his execution. The station's video released is led by Archbishop Jose Gomez of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and includes the leaders of all 12 California dioceses and 2 Catholic eparchies. It was developed by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Each station in the video was taped at a location with rich racial significance. This special prayer to overcome racism in our hearts and society begins and ends at St. Odelia Parish in South Los Angeles, the first African-American Catholic church established in the West, built by African Americans as a beacon of faith, hope, and love. The parish, established in 1926, is a hub for social and religious activities in the community. The 6th Station of the Cross was taped at the Fruitvale BART station in Oakland, where Oscar Grant was killed. The 10th Station of the Cross was taped in a San Diego neighborhood that used to house the local KKK headquarters. Archbishop Gomez concluded the reflection by saying, "If people realize the dignity of the human soul, aside from external experiences, they will be forced to recognize the equality of all men in the sight of God. Let us make that our goal in these weeks and months ahead, to help our neighbors to see the eternal soul of every person and to realize the beautiful dignity and equality that we have in God's eyes." Innovative program by students. This year, farmers with surpluses of vegetable crops, dairy, and other fresh foods were forced to discard their spoiled supply as shoppers looked to stock up on non-perishables from grocery stores. So, in May, a group of college students started FarmLink to connect farmers with food banks. We called a farmer, and he agreed to donate 50,000 pounds of onions. We lined up shipping and delivered food to our local food bank. The next day, we did the same thing with 10,000 eggs. And after we did these 2 shipments, we realized we could make a difference, said FarmLink's Max Goldman. I just want to tell you that it's been so powerful to see so many people coming together, said Zach Harleston. In Los Angeles, the organization helped get 30,000 pounds of broccoli, cauliflower, and mixed greens delivered to Heart of Compassion Food Bank. 5 other food banks across Massachusetts have received 15,000 pounds of carrots, mixed greens, spinach, and potatoes through FarmLink. In Arizona, an additional 40,000 pounds of potatoes made their way to the White Mountain Apache tribe. FarmLink has helped organizations such as Feed the Front Lines New York City, which has now delivered more than 124,000 free meals and helped local restaurants rehire more than 100 employees. I'd like to thank FarmLink, Farmer Hess said, for helping me move 125,000 pounds of potatoes that otherwise would have gone to waste to people here in America. Food insecurity is not going away anytime soon, and neither are we, said FarmLink's Riley. Since the story on FarmLink appeared on World News in May, the college students making up the nonprofit have delivered more than 4 million pounds of food to food banks across 28 states, the equivalent to 3.5 million meals. Clergy sexual abuse and Catholic Church today. Recently, the Catholic League president, Bill Donahue, commented on an Associated Press story on the Catholic Church. Everyone from Nancy Pelosi's husband to the Los Angeles Lakers has received money from the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, but none of the individuals and organizations who have benefited from the congressional legislation angers the Associated Press, except for the Catholic Church. It is livid that a dime went to pay for the church. The Paycheck Protection Program is a financial incentive given by the federal government on the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. As mentioned by Bill Donahue, like AP, there are many others who still continue to tarnish the image of the Catholic Church in the name of clergy sexual abuse. There are some facts and truth that these people and agencies conveniently ignore. They do not do an investigation of Jewish, Mormon, Muslim, or Protestant houses of worship or institutions affiliated with them. Why do they target only the Catholic Church, always? They often say, dramatic rise in recent clergy sex abuse claims, as said by AP. They cite the incident of former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick and the 2018 Pennsylvania grand jury report. They need to know that the sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church took place between 1965 and 1985. The latest audit of clergy sexual abuse, released recently, shows that there were only 8 substantiated accusations made against a member of the clergy between July 1, 2018 and June 30, 2019. Given that there are 49,972 clergy members, which means that only 0.016% had a substantiated allegation made against them. McCarrick is a disgrace, but one man has nothing to do with the kind of hyperbole that the AP indulges in. The grand jury report was about priests who are mostly either dead or out of ministry. They do not report the innumerable efforts taken by the Catholic Church and religious orders to protect children and the vulnerable, the policies and the practices that have come into effect. Catholic Church is all for care and protection of children and the vulnerable. It is all about service to the poor and the needy. It is to provide the love, compassion, and care, and ultimately to bring the kingdom values. So as Bill says, the funds received by Catholic dioceses go to pay for an array of services, many of which are vital to the poor. To suggest otherwise is not only unfair, it is malicious. Human trafficking under COVID-19. In the face of the coronavirus pandemic, the crime of human trafficking continues, with more enslaved now than at any other moment in history, reports Rome reports. The media channel arranged a Zoom conference in which 2 sisters, Sister Gabriela Botani and Sister Anne Victory, who work in the front line of the crisis, shared their international and U.S.-based experiences. They said the lockdown posed various challenges, including an increase in online sexual exploitation. Sister Anne Victory, President, U.S. Catholic Sisters Against Human Trafficking, said, "It's an addiction. It's a very complicated issue without much regard for the persons." We met people that report they are clearly under exploitation, but it is not easy to be recognized as a victim of trafficking, said Sister Gabriela Botani, International Coordinator Talitha Kum, in her sharing. On discussing some of the keys to overcome the issue, they asked to increase the awareness. The conference stressed the need to speak more about this through media and empower people by educating the danger of the situation. The less we speak, the more the trafficker and the related organizations become more powerful, they commented. Fire at San Gabriel Mission. The July 11th fire at Old San Gabriel Mission Church struck deep wounds in the hearts of parishioners. The specific cause of the fire remains under investigation. Although the fire was mainly located in the attic and roof, falling beams damaged many of the newly refurbished benches. Yes, the parish community was closing in on a year-long renovation project to prepare for the 2021 anniversary of the mission's 250 years since its founding in 1771. Early that Saturday morning, San Gabriel firefighters knocked down the blaze within 2 hours, but the residual smoke and water damage reverses much of the parish progress. As a former worship coordinator of the parish who had worked hard on the 225th celebration in 1996, I myself could hardly believe my eyes on the news later that day. It's so very sad. This beautiful old mother of the Catholic Church in Los Angeles battered again by destruction. The city of Los Angeles itself owes its founding to the 44 pobladores who migrated from the mission in 1781 to establish the Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de los Ángeles, Our Lady, Queen of the Angels. Archbishop Gomez, who celebrated Mass the next day in the nearby chapel, invoked the intercession and example of the mission's founder, Saint Junipero Serra, a Spanish missionary who advocated for the rights of California's native peoples, including the Gabrielino Tongva tribe who built San Gabriel. Saint Junipero and the first Franciscan missionaries answered the Lord's call and sacrificed everything to bring His word to this land, he said. Now it is our turn to make sure His word is proclaimed to the next generation. With customary determination, parishioners are now saying, "Let's get to work again." Supreme Court rulings. The Supreme Court has recently made several rulings that have both direct and indirect implications for U.S. Catholics. Many in the Church have lamented the court's ruling in Bostock v. Clayton County, which forces non-religiously exempt employers to conform to their employees' decisions about their sexual identity, meaning, for example, that a biologically male employee may show up for work one day identifying as a female, dressed as a female, and the business has no legal recourse to compel the man to dress like other men in the business. The ruling has far-reaching social implications, not only for employee dress codes, but also for individuals both inside and outside the Church who wish to live in accordance with scientific and theological reality. As Archbishop Gomez said in his response to the ruling, by erasing the beautiful differences and complementary relationship between man and woman, we ignore God's creation and harm the human family, the first building block of society. Another ruling has widely been interpreted as supporting the Church's values and religious freedom more broadly. In Little Sisters of the Poor v. Pennsylvania, the court ruled that the Trump administration has the authority to prevent the Affordable Care Act from forcing private institutions, in this case a group of Catholic sisters, to include contraceptive and abortifacient practices which are clearly against the teachings of the Catholic Church in their employee insurance plans. However, presumptive presidential candidate Joe Biden, a Democrat and professed Catholic, has pledged to reverse the provision that grants the Little Sisters of the Poor this exemption. In Our Lady of Guadalupe School v. Morrissey Baru, the court ruled that the government cannot interfere in the hiring practices of religiously exempt organizations, including Catholic schools, in the form of determining what defines a ministerial role. In practice, this means that Catholics and other religions are free to hire those who agree with their moral and theological teachings, and fire those who do not. This, unlike the Little Sisters of the Poor ruling, is an unqualified win for religious freedom, one that gives our Church a much-needed sigh of relief in these troubled times. Another recent news on Supreme Court decisions is regarding abortion, more popularly known as Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton. On January 22, 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Roe v. Wade in the state of Texas that the Constitution of the United States protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restrictions. The 1973 decision effectively legalized abortions in the United States. The court also divided the pregnancies into trimesters, where during the first trimester, ending a pregnancy was solely up to the woman. During the second trimester, the government can regulate but not ban abortion if the woman's health is at stake. And in the third trimester, abortion is prohibited to protect a fetus who can survive on its own outside the womb unless a woman's health is in danger. In 2014, Louisiana became another major battleground for abortion. Katrina Jackson sponsored Louisiana Act 620, also known as the Unsafe Abortion Protection Act. It was intended to protect women by requiring abortion providers to have admitting privileges to nearby hospitals within 30 miles of their clinic. The state of Louisiana had 6 abortion clinics at that time. When Louisiana Act 620 was signed into law by then Governor Bobby Jindal, only 1 abortion clinic could meet the requirements. The 5 other clinics sued, and the case became known as June Medical Services v. Russo. Russo is actually Stephen Russo, the Secretary of Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals, while June Medical Services were the consolidated 5 abortion clinics and abortion providers. They challenged and argued that Louisiana Act 620 will only leave 1 abortion provider in the state of Louisiana with 4.5 million residents. The abortion clinics won in the district court, and the case went up for appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Meanwhile, all of Louisiana's abortion clinics are back in business because of this decision. Recently, the U.S. Supreme Court voted 5-4, with conservative Justice Roberts siding with 4 court liberals to strike down Louisiana's restrictive abortion law. When all was said and done, The Catholic Church's position regarding sanctity of life at all stages has not changed. We rest knowing that we serve the Lord Almighty and His statutes. Here is another Supreme Court ruling. The incident of 3 mothers in Kalispell, Montana at Stillwater Christian School wanted to participate in a state private contributions eligible for tax credits, which provided scholarships to students in private schools. In 2018, 94% of the scholarships went to students attending religious schools. The Montana Supreme Court ruled against the parents using the state's constitution. It ended up at the U.S. Supreme Court last month. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court decided that if a state decides to subsidize private education, it cannot disqualify some private schools solely because they are religious, in order to provide parental and student choice in education. Chief Justice John Roberts, Jr., writing for the majority in the case, Espinoza v. Montana Department of Revenue, number 181195, said that provision of Montana's Constitution ran afoul of the federal Constitution's protection of the free exercise of religion by discriminating against religious people and schools. Tim Keller, a lawyer with the Institute for Justice, which represented the parents who challenged their exclusion from the Montana program, said, "Policymakers nationwide now have the freedom to enact school choice programs that will empower parents to make important educational decisions for their children." Now, some church-related information. George Ratzinger, brother of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, dies at age 96. George Ratzinger, elder brother of Pope Benedict XVI, entered into eternal life on July 1, 2020. His death came just over a week after the Pope Emeritus visited him in Regensburg, Germany. Both brothers were ordained to the priesthood the same year of 1951, and they both shared a passion for music. George, after studying music in Munich, served for many years as choral director and choir master in many churches. The funeral on July 8th in the Regensburg Cathedral was celebrated by Bishop Rudolf Volderholzer, and Archbishop George Genswein read an emotional letter written by Pope Benedict for the occasion. Remembering his dear brother George, the Pope wrote, "May God reward you for everything you have done, have suffered, and have given me." Pope Francis sent a personal note of condolences to his predecessor, assuring the Pope Emeritus of his prayers, both for his brother and for Benedict himself. New prayer texts from the Vatican in time of pandemic. The song "On Eagle's Wings" by Michael Joncas has been telling us for years not to fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day. That's from Psalm 91, which goes on to say, "Nor the pestilence that roams in the darkness, nor the plague that ravages at noon." In these days of COVID-19, during which the whole world has been gravely stricken by the virus, Catholic dioceses around the world have asked the Vatican's worship offices for Mass prayers imploring God to bring an end to this pandemic. U.S. dioceses have recently received a very welcome official decree from Rome in answer to this request. Accompanying the decree are texts of appropriately worded priest prayers and scriptural readings. These prayers implore God's power to help our scientists gain a measure of control over the virus that will save lives at all levels during this challenging time. decline in confession called harmful to church's mission to spread gospel. Archdiocese of Philadelphia's evangelization director, Megan Coakley, said, with COVID-19 restrictions lifting, pastors looking to welcome faithful back should rethink their confession schedules and start talking more about the sacrament in the pulpit. According to her, the lack of convenient times for the sacrament of reconciliation, along with a poor understanding of its significance, are leading to declines in overall Mass attendance. As a traditional practice, many churches have their regular confession Saturday afternoon before the Vigil Mass. However, many faithful, especially young families, find it hard to adjust to the time. The Union of Catholic Asian News states that the lines for confession have been shrinking for years. A study by the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate found that in 2005, 42% of Catholic adults said they never went to confession, a number that rose to 45% in CARA's 2008 follow-up polling. The latter study found that 30% participated in the sacrament of reconciliation less than once a year. In Catholic teaching, the confession is the sacrament of penance by which an individual confesses sins committed and have them absolved by God through the administration of a priest. However, these recent changes in faith practice strikes the core of Christian faith itself. In her comment, Coakley said, "We are actually missing the heart of the matter when we fail to turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel." The intent of this sacrament is to provide healing for the soul as well as to regain the grace of God lost by sin. We have to start talking about the call to conversion as an expression of Christ's love, that He wants our burdens pulled off of us and He wants our chains broken, said Coakley as a concluding remark. New report says Iraqi Christians could face extinction. A new report from the pontifical charity Aid to the Church in Need states that without immediate action from the international community, Christians in northern Iraq could be endangered with extinction. The international community must take immediate and decisive action to tackle the problems which are threatening the continuing Christian presence in Iraq, said Edward Clancy, Director of Outreach for Aid to the Church in Need, USA. It is more important than ever that world leaders work together to prevent Christian numbers falling further in Iraq, he added. According to the ACN survey report, 87% of the Christians feel unsafe or absolutely unsafe, and 67% believe it is likely or very likely that Islamic State or a similar group will return in the next 5 years. Of those wishing to emigrate, 69% cite political and security reasons for their primary cause. According to some media reports, in the summer of 2014, more than 100,000 Christians were uprooted from their homes by ISIS, fleeing to the Kurdistan region in northern Iraq. After the liberation of the Nineveh Plains in early 2017, Aid to the Church in Need launched what it calls a modern-day Marshall Plan to tackle the mammoth task of rebuilding Christian homes. ACN has since helped restore 2,860 damaged or destroyed Christian homes in 6 cities and villages on the Nineveh Plains. It now plans to focus on rebuilding the infrastructure of church-run facilities. News from the Divine Word missionaries. change of assignments and offices among the clergy. July is always the month when new assignments are assumed. This year, too, a few of the Divine Word missionary priests of U.S. West Province assumed their change of assignments on the 1st of July. The provincial administration was changed after the 6 years of provincialship of Father Sonny Sebastian. New provincial Father John Kirby and his council members were installed on June 1st at the Divine Word residence, Riverside, during a simple Eucharistic celebration. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, the ceremony was limited to only the immediate community members. The installation Mass began with Father Sonny Sebastian, the outgoing provincial, as presider. He welcomed the community and the council members. "It surely is very strange," he said, "when we should have the whole province present. However, we are with everyone in spirit, and every member of the province assures their cooperation, prayers, and blessings to the new provincial and the team." After the readings and the gospel, Father Sonny read the appointment letters of the council members and the provincial. He handed a copy of the Constitution of the Society, the Handbook for Superiors, and the key to the province office to Father John Kirby, the new provincial. John took over to be the main celebrant from that moment. During the homily that followed, he used an African story dramatized by two of the members to bring home the message of working together and helping one another. The new council members are Pavel Sochulak, Vice Provincial, Dominic Asare, Monitor, Zibig Frajnak, and Duong Nguyen, counselors. Divine Word Missionaries COVID-19 outreach. Since the outbreak of coronavirus, the Divine Word Missionaries has been confronted by two queries. How are we facing the COVID-19 pandemic? And what challenges does it present to us as Divine Word missionaries? The missionaries wasted no time in finding ways and means to respond to the extraordinary situation created by COVID-19. Many provinces began emergency programs for the neediest through social and community service centers. Christ Primalaya, Regional Theologate, Ashta in Central Indian Province, helped around 100 families of daily wage laborers in 8 villages with kits, including rice and other groceries. Reaching out to pandemic-hit families, India Hyderabad Province distributed essential items like masks, washing soap, sanitizers, etc., to 250 families. In Hungary, with the help of benefactors, friends, and local collaboration, aid relief was given to gypsies. In Cuba, the Divine Word missionaries and Holy Spirit sisters in Havana worked together to run a feeding program for the aged. This project offers food at lunchtime to about 50 aged persons. The missionaries in Brazil had food distribution to the homeless in São Paulo. These are only a few samples of the missionary help and assistance provided by the SVD missionaries in all the provinces around the world. The contagion that spread worldwide affected Divine Word missionaries as well. In his letter dated 20th June, Superior General Paulus Budi-Kleden, SVD, said, "As a congregation, we too are not spared from the carnage of COVID-19. From the information received until then, 27 confreres were infected. 4 confreres had lost their lives. 7 confreres have recovered, and 16 are with mild symptoms or asymptomatic. There were also reports of some lay missionaries, associates, and family members who have died or are recovering from COVID-19. Special assistance from European mission offices of the SVD. The mission offices of the European Central Provinces of the Society of the Divine Word, namely in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, have risen to the occasion to respond to the pandemic. The corona lockdown has made it impossible for daily wage earners to make their living. Stay at home meant no work, no income, no food. We knew that we must make efforts to help, said the representatives of the mission procures. While each mission procure checked how much money they could give for immediate relief projects, they also contacted the Generalate and offered their services to respond to the pandemic. In this way, a concerted fundraising campaign was started. In order to bring the message and the request for help to donors, the 3 mission offices are using different channels of communication: the website, direct mail, supplements in Christian newspapers, especially in the SVD magazine Stat Gottes. Those who work in the mission offices were moved and inspired by the outpouring of generosity. We are proud of our donors, benefactors. They are good people. They are able to look beyond their own trouble and give to others who are more in need. They donate generously, much more than we expected. Now we trust that our missionaries will use the funds well and help people to survive in these challenging times, stated the mission procures. Now some general items. It is better to wear a mask. In this time of the pandemic, it is highly recommended that all wear masks, keep social distancing, and wash hands frequently. Recently, there has been a reaction against the masks. Some people have recalled the inaugural address of President John F. Kennedy in 1961, when he issued a call to public service and sacrifice. My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. An editorial in the LA Times stated, "That message of putting the public good ahead of one's own personal desires has never resonated more strongly. When some may be tempted to proclaim their individual freedom to throw off the uncomfortable mask and revel in a crowd of strangers, perhaps they could think what Kennedy or someone of equal stature might say today. United, we can stand against the virus. Divided, we all fall." Others don't believe that the masks help at all. However, medical experts state that it really protects the other person. Helmets for motorcycles, bicycles, seat belts in cars, and smoking bans in restaurants all provoked battles over personal liberty. So this battle should be no surprise. The virus seems to be getting worse each day, especially in California, Texas, Arizona, and Florida. More states are added with each news release. Putting up with a little discomfort is a small price to pay for helping to stem the spread of this pandemic. It's an individual sacrifice for the greater good of public health. It is true that many are suffering from pandemic fatigue, but as Dr. Anthony Fauci says, a small percentage of people who don't comply can have an impact on the entire population. You may be asymptomatic and don't know you have the virus. So for the sake of those whom you encounter, it is best to wear the mask. Turkey decides to make the Istanbul's Hagia Sophia's museum a mosque. A controversial decision to change the status of the ancient church was made last week by Turkish President Erdogan. As the Turkish presidency website notes, the resurrection of Hagia Sophia heralds the liberation of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Hagia Sophia was built nearly 1,500 years ago as a Christian cathedral, but after the Ottoman conquest in 1453, it was turned into a mosque. Since 1934, the iconic building in Istanbul has served as a museum. President Erdogan said the first Muslim prayers would be held in Hagia Sophia on July 24. The building will remain open to non-Muslims and foreign visitors. But during prayers, the Christian images are planned to be covered by curtains and special lighting. The World Council of Churches has called on Erdogan to reverse these decisions. Pope Francis addressed this issue during the weekly Angelus prayer on Sunday. "I think of Hagia Sophia, and I am very saddened," he said. Concert honoring St. John Paul II centenary available online. A concert honoring the centennial of St. John Paul II's birth is now available online. The concert, featuring some of the United States and Poland's top classical music artists, was held on June 21st. The concert features introductory remarks from Polish Archbishop Stanislaw Gadecki of Poznan, president of Poland's Bishops' Conference, and Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York. The performances can be seen at jp2concert.com. The total running time is 2 hours and 47 minutes. The musical program begins with pianist Szymon Nehring in a church courtyard, playing a solo piano rendition of Etude in C-sharp minor, number 25, opus 9, written by one of Poland's musical treasures, Friedrich Chopin. The program is a combination of sacred and classical music. The performance included folk songs, patriotic and religious, including the favorite of Karol Wojtyła, Barca. The event was held under the patronage of the John Paul II Foundation in Rome, the Institute of the Heritage of National Thought, the Center for Thought of John Paul II in Warsaw, the Polish Community Association, the Consulate General of the Republic of Poland in New York, and the Joseph Piłsudski Institute of America. That's all for this edition of Mission Minute News. Until we meet again in another edition, stay safe, and may Jesus' love for you make you smile.